Right now, somewhere in your house, something is making noise, a fridge humming, a notification buzzing, a show playing in the background while you do something else. You have never once in your life sat in a room with absolutely nothing happening. Not really. Even your silence has a soundtrack. But for almost all of human history, silence wasn't a soundtrack. It was the default setting. No screens, no engines, no hum of electricity in the walls. Just wind, breath, and the occasional crack of a fire. So what did your ancestors actually do with all that quiet? The real answer is far stranger than nothing. Silence wasn't empty for them. It was working on them in ways your noisy brain has almost completely forgotten how to do. Start with a simple fact. For roughly 300,000 years, Homo sapiens lived without a single mechanical sound. No traffic, no machinery, no recorded music. The loudest thing most people ever heard was thunder, or their own voice raised in anger or song. Compare that to you. Your ears are rarely, if ever, given a break. Studies on modern urban environments estimate that the average city dweller is almost never outside the range of some artificial sound, day or night. Your ancestors' brains evolved inside that ancient quiet. And quiet, it turns out, is not a passive backdrop. It's an active ingredient. In 2013, a researcher named Imke Kirsta ran an experiment that sounds almost too simple to matter. She exposed mice to different types of sound: white noise, pop calls, music, and, as a control, 2 hours of silence a day. The silence group was the only one that showed a measurable increase in new cell growth in the hippocampus, the brain region tied to memory and learning. Not the music, not the calming sounds, the silence. Think about what that means. Doing nothing, hearing nothing, wasn't the brain idling. It was the brain building. Here's where it gets stranger. Neuroscientist Marcus Reichley spent years studying what the brain does when you're not doing anything at all. No task, no conversation, no stimulation. He found that instead of going quiet, a specific network lights up, the default mode network. This is the system responsible for self-reflection, memory consolidation, moral reasoning, and imagining the future. Your brain doesn't switch off in silence. It switches to a different kind of on, one that never gets a chance to activate when a screen is glowing 6 inches from your face. Your ancestors lived inside that state for hours, almost every single day. Picture it. A woman sitting at the edge of camp, weaving grass into cord, saying nothing, hearing nothing but insects and wind. A man walking for an hour back to camp with nothing but his own footsteps for company. A group sitting around a dying fire, not talking, just watching embers fade. None of that looked like productivity, but it was, in a sense, the modern mind barely recognizes anymore. Anthropologist James Sussman spent years living among the Juhwansi San people of the Kalahari, one of the last populations to have practiced a hunting and gathering lifestyle into the modern era. What he documented overturned a common assumption. Their lives weren't a constant exhausting scramble for survival. Foraging for enough food to live comfortably often took only 15 to 17 hours a week. The rest of the time was filled with something that looked, to outside eyes, almost like idleness. Sitting, talking a little, watching, doing nothing in particular. But nothing in particular is doing a lot of hidden work. Unstructured quiet time is when the brain sorts through the day. It's when scattered experiences get filed into long-term memory. It's when problems that felt unsolvable during the noise of the day suddenly click into place. You felt this yourself, probably in the shower, or on a walk without your phone, when an answer arrives out of nowhere. That's not nowhere. That's the default mode network, finally getting its turn. Silence also did something else for your ancestors. It kept them alive. In a world with predators, unfamiliar sounds meant danger. A snapped twig, a rustle in grass that shouldn't be moving, a bird going suddenly quiet. None of that information is available to a brain drowning in artificial noise. Quiet wasn't just restful. It was a sensory instrument, tuned to catch the one sound that mattered among 1,000 that didn't. Your body still carries that tuning, even if you never use it. Sit in true silence for more than a minute and notice what happens. Your ears start reaching. Small sounds you normally filter out, a clock, your own heartbeat, become suddenly loud. That's not your imagination glitching. That's ancient equipment, still functional, just starved of a job. Silence did more than protect your ancestors. It shaped how they connected with each other. Without music playing in the background, without a screen to glance at during an awkward pause, conversation carried a different weight. A silence between two people wasn't something to fill. It was something to sit inside, together. Grief worked the same way. There was no ambient noise to distract a mourning parent from their loss, no notification to interrupt the ache. Grief simply happened, fully in the quiet, until it moved through and out the other side. Emotions processed in silence tend to resolve. Emotions constantly interrupted tend to linger. Silence was also where stories were born, long before they were told. A hunter walking home alone for an hour wasn't just getting from one place to another. He was quietly turning the day over in his mind, deciding which parts were worth repeating around the fire that night and which parts to leave out. That kind of narrative editing, the shaping of raw experience into a story with a beginning, a middle, and a meaning, requires exactly the kind of unstructured mental space that the default mode network provides. Every campfire story your ancestors ever told was assembled, first in silence. Even courtship leaned on it. Without music to dance to or games to play, two people getting to know each other had far fewer tools to hide behind. Long stretches of shared quiet, sitting near a fire, walking without talking became their own kind of communication. You learned who someone was by how they handled silence with you, not by how they filled it. Here is the counterintuitive twist. Modern humans don't just tolerate noise. Many of them actively avoid silence, even when it's offered to them for free. In a widely discussed 2014 study led by psychologist Timothy Wilson, participants were left alone in a room with nothing to do but think for as little as 6 to 15 minutes. No phone, no book, just their own mind. A significant number of participants rated the experience as unpleasant. Some, given the option, chose to give themselves a mild electric shock rather than sit with their own thoughts in silence. Read that again. People chose pain over quiet. That single fact says something enormous about how far the modern brain has drifted from its original operating conditions. Silence used to be where your ancestors processed grief, rehearsed stories, and planned the next day's hunt, and simply existed without performing for anyone. Now, for a lot of people, silence feels less like rest and more like exposure, like being left alone with a version of themselves they've spent years avoiding through noise. Some ancient cultures didn't just tolerate silence, they ritualized it. Certain hunting traditions required absolute quiet for hours at a stretch, not just for stealth, but because sustained attention itself was treated as a discipline worth practicing. Vigil traditions across early human cultures, sitting through the night beside the dead, waiting in silence before a hunt, fasting alone before a rite of passage, all used stillness and quiet as a kind of pressure. Something was supposed to happen inside a person who sat still and said nothing for long enough. Modern neuroscience would now describe that pressure in fairly specific terms. Sustained silence reliably shifts brain activity out of external monitoring and into internal integration. Your ancestors didn't have that vocabulary. They didn't need it. They simply noticed, generation after generation, that something important tended to arrive in the quiet, and they built rituals around waiting for it. That avoidance has a cost. Chronic exposure to noise, even at levels most people consider normal, has been linked in public health research to elevated stress hormones, disrupted sleep, and higher cardiovascular risk. Your nervous system, tuned over hundreds of thousands of years to treat silence as safety, and noise as a signal to stay alert, is almost never allowed to downshift. It's a little like keeping a smoke detector running at full sensitivity for 16 hours a day, every day, whether or not there's ever any smoke. Your ancestors didn't need meditation apps or noise-canceling headphones to access the mental state you now have to schedule and pay for. Silence simply happened to them, constantly, by default. The default mode network turned on because nothing was competing for its attention. Memories consolidated because there was room for them to. Anxiety had space to surface and often to resolve. instead of being buried under the next notification. You inherited a brain built to run in the quiet. You're running it, most of your waking life, in the equivalent of a crowded humming room it was never designed for. That doesn't mean silence is only nostalgic or something you lost and can never reclaim. Unlike almost everything else about the ancestral environment, the open plains, the megafauna, the small trusted bands of 20 or 30 people, silence is still available to you right now for free. You don't need land or tools or 15,000 years of cultural knowledge to access it. You need to turn a few things off and let a few minutes pass. That's the entire barrier to entry. And yet, for most people, it might as well be a mountain. The mice in Kirsty's lab grew new brain cells from 2 hours of nothing. The Juhuanzi built entire social worlds out of unstructured, quiet time. Your own mind, whether or not you've asked it to, is still waiting for its turn to do the same kind of work. It hasn't forgotten how. It's just rarely, if ever, given the chance. So tonight, when the fridge hums and the notification buzzes and the show plays quietly in the background while you do something else, remember this. You have never once in your life sat in a room with absolutely nothing happening. Somewhere underneath all that noise, something ancient is still waiting for the quiet to start.